I think what's helpful for entrepreneurs is to have some frameworks to be able to deal with. Because when I, both as an entrepreneur and also as an investor, I found it's very common that everyone wants to talk about scale, right? Because they read the TechCrunch headlines about everyone scaling. And so that's like the exciting thing that everyone wants to talk about.
Sure.
But in many cases, you have really early stage companies that don't have scaling problems.
Yeah.
They have validation problems. They have product market fit problems.
Sure.
And so when you focus all of your energy on the wrong, on scaling before you're really ready to do it, it can be a kind of a company ending mistake. There's the stage before product market fit, and then there's the stage after product market fit.
Okay.
Scaling is really something that happens after product market fit. And until you get to product market fit, all you should be focusing on is getting to product market fit.
Okay. Gotcha.
Not getting distracted with a someday maybe problem. Because if you don't get to product market fit, frankly, you're not going to have a scaling problem. So I think that one thing that people neglect to appreciate is that like even companies like Uber and Airbnb, like they actually started in very, very humble beginnings.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like Uber was just a black car service for people in San Francisco.
Yes.
It actually didn't look anything like what it looks like now.
Sure.
And Airbnb was like renting out air mattresses on their spare bedrooms. Like it was nothing that would even resemble what it looks like today. So I think that everyone falls in love with the idea of scaling and falls in love with the end point, but neglects to realize what the journey looks like.
Sure.
And so for me, what I've found is that like startups and even projects within bigger companies go through these like very defined 4 stages.
Okay.
And so I'll just kind of talk about those stages because I think it would be helpful as a framework for entrepreneurs. Sure. So the first phase of starting a company is what I call the incubation period. It's like shaping something out of clay. It's very messy. It's not highly structured. There's some methodologies that you can use, like Lean Startup, to try to have some structure there.
Sure.
But the point is you don't have a huge team. You don't have a huge amount of capital. And frankly, what you're optimizing for is I would say speed and flexibility. Okay. So you're trying to find a problem. And you're trying to find a consistent set of customers.
Sure.
That's where you start, is the problem and the customer. You don't start with the solution and then go search for a problem.
Yeah, gotcha.
So that's I would say the first stage. And that stage can take 3 months, it can take a year, that incubation period. And sometimes you find that the idea that you had is not a consistent enough problem or you can't find enough customers. And frankly, then you go back to the drawing board and you try new things.
Sure.
And that cycle can kind of repeat. And then sometimes you do find a consistent problem and it's very painful for customers and a consistent enough customer base. And then you can kind of exit that first phase of incubation and move into the second phase of validation.
Sure.
And what validation is about is really around proving out some more hypotheses on a very, very small scale. It's still like you're talking about, this can be 2 people in a spare bedroom.
Okay, gotcha.
You don't need a huge team, you don't need a VP of marketing. This is still a founder exercise.
Okay.
And what the validation period is kind of defined by is starting to validate some other components of the business model, again, on a very small scale. So imagine first you have validation around the problem, then you've validated the customer, then you validate some aspects of your MVP of the solution, like what's the minimum viable product that you can deliver.
Sure.
And then some basic understanding of whether you think you can make money or not. Like this is not completely baked, it's still early days. And this process is maybe for a B2B company going and getting your first 10 customers that are not your cousins and friends. Do people actually want to use what you have created? Again, on a very, very small scale.
Okay.
And that's typically done by a really small team. You don't need a lot of capital to do that. You can validate things relatively quickly and with minimal amounts of capital. And then making sure that a lot of your growth is organic. So if you're a B2B company, are you getting referred to other customers?
Sure.
If you're a consumer company, are they sending it to their friends? The focus should be on building something that people love.
Gotcha.
Like all of the focus should not be on scaling. It should be building something that people love, even a small number of people, that they really love this. And then that's kind of what I would call the validation phase. And the common misconception, this happens very often, is that people go through that phase and then they confuse validation for being ready to scale.
Yeah.
So again, everyone gets really excited and starts to like go step on the gas. And what I found is that there's actually a third phase, which I call the upshift phase, which is post-validation pre-scale.
Okay.
And what that stage is categorized as is really predictability and repeatability. So let's say that in the validation phase, you were able to get 10 customers. The upshift phase is around doing that by maybe 3 to 4 times and seeing if everything else holds true.
Okay.
So if you go and get 3 or 4 times as many customers, do they all love the product as much, just as much? Do you have any kind of repeatability of how you find customers?
Yeah.
Do you have any kind of repeatability with the cost of finding customers?
Yeah.
So it's like taking what you learned in the validation phase and just expanding it by 3 or 4 times.
Sure.
And what you find in that phase is that, again, you're still a very small team. When you go into the scale phase, being the 4th phase, you add a lot of infrastructure. You typically you increase your burn rate substantially. And so what you lose is flexibility and agility. Okay. So if you're wrong, it's very hard to pivot. And it's very hard to make adjustments because you now have all this infrastructure built around it.
Yeah.
And you also have cut your runway substantially.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm a big fan of really keeping teams small, agile, and flexible to move through that upshift phase. Maybe that's where you add 1 or 2 more people,
Sure.
but you don't go and add 10.
Sure.
And then once you've kind of proven that all those things hold true and you have repeatability and predictability in the business model, then you have scaling challenges.
Sure.
So it's really like the 4th stage, and sometimes that can take 5 years. It can take 8 years. And so in building a business, there's always the steak and the sizzle, and scaling is the sizzle for sure.
Sure.
But I think it does entrepreneurs a disservice to be focusing on that right out of the gates. And in many cases, that's the cause of premature scaling.
Sure.
Is that people increase their burn rates, they start spending a bunch of money on acquiring customers for a product that people don't really love.
Yeah.
And they can put themselves out of business that way.